History is just his story, right? That's what I was told. Black folks have been told all types of stories, and a lot of them just were not true. But here's the problem. If a racist said gravity exists, does that mean gravity doesn't exist? Well, we have actual evidence for gravity. Like, we can document, we can verify gravity is a real thing. And so it is with history. History should not be about someone's story. It should be about evidence and actual documentation. So I was born, I came into the world, and guess what? That is documented. Not only do I have a birth certificate, there are witnesses. There are other ways to verify that this person was born. Here's a social security card. Here's their school records. Here's content from the internet. Here's articles they wrote. There are a lot of ways to verify this person that you're looking at right now exists. So it is with history. Like, we're talking about things that happened hundreds of years ago and sometimes thousands of years ago. How in the world do you know that that actually happened? That is the work that scholars do. And so, particularly as a black person who was told that you're inferior and that there was scientific evidence to verify that you're inferior, it is important that we figure out what is the documentation, what is the evidence for what I'm being told. If you tell me that George Washington was a slave owner, how do you know that? What is the evidence? Scholars are actually going to dig through the stacks and figure out, can we find the actual records? Can we find evidence of that? You can't just say something. What is the evidence for that? If we say Harriet Tubman went down south and tried to free people, scholars went, you better verify that. So we're not just going to take her word, which is great, but let's talk to other people who were around who can corroborate that story. Let's talk to people that she actually went down and freed and hear their story and make sure it lines up with the other stories. Let's look at people who are in the business of keeping record of runaways and people moving through the Underground Railroad. Let's look at their work. Do all those things line up? If so, then we can say we know something about her activities. That's the work of historians. It's not enough to say the Civil War happened, right? Well, how do we know it happened? It's not enough to say I read a book about it. If we want to know about the Civil War, scholars are going to look at the diaries of men who served in that war. They're going to look at hospital records. What happened? What type of injuries did they have? Let's get actual documentation from people who were working on these men and treating these men. Let's also read their diaries. What do they say about this? Let's read all the reports from the War Department every single week, every single day. All this information, all this data is coming. Let's actually pour through it. A lot of people just don't have the time to do that. And that's understandable. But there are people who do. And we owe them some level of respect. It's not about his story. It's about what can be documented. And unfortunately, far too many people think history is just about saying what you think happened. No, if we tell you that this is what happened on the slave ship, it's because there are records and firsthand accounts of people who were there. And if all those things line up and they say the same thing, then we have a truthful account that we feel good about. That is the work of documenting things in history. And it's just unfortunate at this point. It's just a free-for-all. It's the Wild West. People just get on the internet and talk. No, what is the evidence for what you're saying? Yes, we've been lied to. I get it. So we should be the people who are critical and challenging. But you got to come from a place of knowledge. You can't just say, I don't believe anything because the white man. That doesn't work. That's actually nonsensical. Because you believe in gravity. That doesn't work. There are all types of wonderful black scholars doing work out here. Your answer can't be everything is his story. Now, sometimes that is a valid critique. For example, I love the example of the Underground Railroad. For years, many people were under the impression that the Underground Railroad existed because some wonderful charitable white people were running safe houses and hiding people in basements. Some of that's true. It's not a lie. The problem is that white scholars who did a lot of work earlier in that they centered white people. Not necessarily because they're evil, whatever their motivations are. But that's why you need what we call peer review. You need people to look at that and say, hold up, you left this out, or maybe did you think about this? You didn't consider that. And we have all this other scholarship now that says, actually, overwhelmingly, black folks were moving people through this network, and overwhelmingly by water and not by land. Those black men, by the way, were called blackjacks. Fun fact. So scholars don't always get it right. They need to be pushed. They need to be challenged. And so we need peer review, especially as a black person. Like, if you come up with a new idea, I need to know, does anybody else co-sign? Can anybody else critique this who actually knows what they're talking about? It'd be like a mechanic saying, you know what? The problem with your engine is when it rains, all that pollution in the air, it comes down and gets in your car. Well, I don't know anything about cars, so that actually sounds like, okay, maybe plausible, possibly. But you need another mechanic who actually really knows cars to say, that's ridiculous. It don't even work like that. So it is in history. Far too many people who know far too little are doing way too much talking on the internet about things they have no clue about. So again, there's a method and there's a discipline to this. Most people are not going to go read all the records of the War Department week to week to know what happened during the Civil War. And it's understandable. People got jobs. People got things to do. But there are people who devote their lives to this. And I think we owe them the respect to at least listen. But if you don't know what you're talking about, it's okay to just say that. We're all learning. But history is not just about somebody's story. Real history is about the documentation. Discovering what that is, discovering what the evidence for this thing is. And then we can say we know something. And unfortunately, that's just something people are just not doing out here.